During my daughter's funeral, my ex-husband had the audacity to arrive with his mistress shouting at me, "This is all your fault. Our daughter is dead because of you. You failed to even keep an eye on her." I just smiled and informed him, "I will see you in court." And 5 minutes later, the police showed up. The sky itself appeared to have decided to weep right. With Aisha sterling, somber rain-filled clouds collected above as the mourners gathered at South View Cemetery in Atlanta for Naima's service. A chill wind wound through the tombstones as if to wrap its arms around those present in a sorrow too deep for words. Aisha, in a plain black dress, her face a mask that shifted between utter exhaustion and raw resignation, stood before the coffin, her shaking hands clutching a single white lily, a quiet symbol of her last goodbye. All around, soft whispers filled the air with fragmented words that hinted at the unease of people lost for words before such a new tragedy. "She was just a child," an older woman murmured from the rear of the crowd. "Poor Aisha. That girl was her whole world. And now this," a different person quietly added, voice almost a whisper. Aisha was deaf to them, her mind lost in a maelstrom of memories. She recalled Naima's morning laughter, silly fights about nothing, and above all else, she remembered her daughter's eyes, which were always brimming with life. The final time she had seen Naima, they were clouded as if a shadow was devouring her from within. The pastor started his eulogy, his drone-like voice resonating in the frigid air. Yet before he could progress far into his sermon, the jarring noise of a truck shattered the solemn quiet. Every head snapped toward the approaching vehicle. As it crawled forward, its tires grinding into the wet earth. The air grew thick with tension. Out of the truck stepped Kofi Bamaideli, Aisha's former husband. His sleek gray suit, wildly inappropriate for the event, was a stark contrast to his frigid expression. Beside him, Willow Reed, a younger woman in a form-fitting dress with perfect makeup, emerged with an assured gait. The whispers swelled into an angry rumble, and Aisha, for the first time in ages, felt a wave of fury replace her sorrow. Kofi shoved his way through the attendees, dismissing the disapproving stares cast his way and the condolences a few attempted to give. "Kofi, please, not now," pleaded Amani, Aisha's sister, trying to block him. "Not the time," he shot back, his voice chilling everyone present. "This was never supposed to happen. This is entirely her fault." Kofi aimed a finger straight at Aisha. His accusation sliced through the air like a blade. The shocked guests were unsure if they should step in or simply stay away. "Our little girl is dead because of you," Kofi bellowed, deaf to the growing chorus of outrage surrounding them. "You were incompetent, you couldn't even protect her, and you called yourself her mother." Willow attempted to soothe him, placing a hand on his arm, but he violently shrugged her off. His eyes remained fixed on Aisha, hunting for any sign of a reaction. But all he received was a profound silence. Aisha lifted her gaze to meet his. Her eyes, bloodshot from weeping, were now completely dry. What appeared on her face stunned everyone. A smile. It wasn't friendly or mocking. It was a chilling smirk, as though her all-consuming rage had finally discovered a new outlet. "I will be seeing you in court," she stated, her voice quiet but so sharp that every single person heard her. Everyone present heard it. The words landed like a stone in a pond, sending shockwaves through the crowd. Kofi, stunned by Aisha's composure, was momentarily silent. Then he erupted. "What are you talking about? You have nothing on me," he roared, lunging toward her. Imani swiftly stepped in, positioning herself between them. "Stop this, Kofi. This is not about you and Aisha. This is your daughter's funeral." Before Kofi could retort, the hush wail of police sirens grew closer. The mourners turned as one, their gazes fixed on the cemetery gates, where two patrol cars pulled to a halt. Officers emerged, striding purposefully in Kofi's direction. "Kofi B. Medell," one officer stated, producing a pair of handcuffs. "You're being detained on suspicion of wire fraud and obstruction of justice." A profound silence descended. Willow flinched, her hands flying to her mouth. in shock as Kofi struggled against them. This is a mistake. You have no proof, Aisha. You're behind this. You'll pay for this. He bellowed, his voice seething with rage as they cuffed him and led him to the cruiser. Aisha remained silent. Her expression was unchanged, serene, almost detached. The guests glanced at one another, bewildered, struggling to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Imani went to Aisha, clearly shaken. "What was that? What's happening?" she asked quietly. "The truth." Imani, Aisha, answered, her gaze locked on the departing police car. The truth always finds a way out. The service proceeded, but the entire atmosphere had been utterly transformed. The focus had shifted from Naima to the questions raised by Kofi's sudden arrest. Murmurs of speculation and wild theories filled the air. As the minister concluded his eulogy and Naima's casket descended into the ground, Aisha stood alone before the open grave. Imani attempted to remain by her side, but Aisha requested a moment alone. "I promise they will know the truth." "Naima," Aisha murmured, setting a white lily upon the fresh earth. "No one will ever hurt you or your legacy again." The heavens finally opened, unleashing a downpour as if it too sought to wash away the weight of all the pent-up emotions. While the other mourners began to leave, Aisha stood, unmoving, her eyes locked on the spot where her daughter lay. This was more than a goodbye. It was the start of something far greater. The rain fell without mercy as Aisha stayed before Naima's grave. Her dark dress was now drenched, but she was indifferent. She felt only a crushing emptiness and the relentless echo of Kofi's accusation replaying in her head. "You couldn't even keep her safe." The vicious, poison-laced words had pierced her like a blade through her heart, yet she refused to let it shatter her. Alone now in the graveyard, she released a sigh that seemed to hold all the sorrow of the world. Imani drew near with an umbrella, moving closer to her sister. Her voice was soft, nearly a whisper. "Aisha, we should go home. You can't remain out here all night." Aisha did not reply at once. At last she gave a slow nod, as if the burden of all she had endured was forcing her to move in slow motion. She let Imani guide her toward the car, where the silence between the sisters was so thick you could feel it, as if any sound might shatter it like glass. Driving to Aisha's home, memories washed over her, mixing with the pain, the nagging doubts that had festered since Naima's death. As she reached the house, Aisha paused inside the car, for a moment gazing at the home she'd shared with her daughter for so many years. All the lights were dark, and the crushing emptiness of the house hit her with a sudden, brutal force. Imani leaned closer. "You don't need to face this alone tonight. Please, just stay with me." Aisha shook her head, her voice a fragile whisper. "I have to be here. This is the only place where I can still feel Naima's presence." Imani's expression was full of worry, but she didn't press the issue. She watched her go in, reminding her that she was only a phone call away if anything was needed. Aisha shut the front door behind her, and for a heartbeat all was still. It was the kind of oppressive silence that felt deafening. She ascended the stairs to Naima's bedroom. Everything was exactly as her daughter left it. The unmade bedbooks stacked on her desk with clothes strewn over a chair. The room was saturated with Naima's very essence, and for Aisha, the grief became unbearable. She sank onto the bed, clutching a pillow tightly as a fresh wave of sorrow washed over her. That was when something on the floor by the desk captured her gaze. It was a small notebook, its cover torn. She had never seen it there before. She bent to retrieve it, and as she opened it, she understood it was Naima's personal diary. The initial pages were filled with doodles and sketches, but as she read on, the words started to spin a story that Aisha could have never imagined. The next morning broke to the persistent ringing of the phone. Aisha, her eyes puffy from weeping and lack of sleep, answered with a raspy voice. "Hello, Aisha, it's Imani. You need to turn on the television immediately." Aisha frowned in confusion but did as she was told. When the screen flickered to life, her heart skipped a beat. News report was showing footage of Kofi's arrest at the funeral. The news anchor spoke with a grave tone. Kofi Bamidele, a prominent real estate developer, was taken into custody yesterday at his own daughter's funeral. He is accused of wire fraud and involvement in a corruption ring that also includes money laundering. Bamidele has refuted all charges, stating that it is a conspiracy orchestrated against him. Aisha switched off the television, a cold fury beginning to boil deep inside of her. The depths of Kofi's hypocrisy were boundless. He'd even made his daughter's funeral a spectacle for his own ego and to fuel his victim narrative. Her eyes landed on Naima's diary, which was still open on the table. The final words she'd read the previous night echoed in her mind. "I'm so scared. I don't know what I should do. Dad is involved in something awful, and I don't know if I'm supposed to tell anyone." Aisha knew that those words could not be ignored. She picked up the diary and took it over to the dining room table, where she started to read it more intently. The pages began to reveal a very disturbing pattern. Naima had been getting anonymous messages on her phone, some containing veiled threats, while others had explicit commands for her to remain silent. She also wrote about conversations she'd overheard between Kofi and Willow, which were full of financial terms that Naima didn't comprehend, but they had clearly terrified her. The most chilling discovery, however, came near the very end of the diary. Naima wrote about a manila envelope she had discovered in Kofi's private home office. She mentioned that it held some crucial documents, but she didn't specify their contents. The only detail she gave was that she'd hidden it somewhere safe to protect herself. With a new resolve, Aisha made her way to the office Kofi used during his time in the house. She began searching every corner, opening drawers and checking shelves. Finally, concealed behind a framed photo of Naima's Spelman College acceptance letter, she discovered a metal box secured with a key. Her heart hammered as she opened it with one of the keys Naima had hidden in her desk drawer. Inside was a thick folder brimming with documents. Aisha started to review them, and her discovery sent a chill down her spine. There were bank statements, wire transfers, and contracts that deeply implicated Kofi in illicit activities. But the most stunning was a list of names alongside amounts of money. Among those names was Naima's. Aisha dropped the papers, unable to grasp what she was seeing. Kofi hadn't simply involved Naima in his dark dealings. He had used her as just one more tool in his web of corruption. The pain transformed into an unyielding fury. Later, Imani arrived at the house to find Aisha in the dining room surrounded by documents. "What is all this?" she asked, worried. Aisha looked up, her gaze full of determination. "It is the truth, Imani. The truth of what Kofi did to Naima. I cannot stay quiet. This must come to light." Imani sat next to her, carefully looking over the documents. As she read, her expression changed from disbelief to horror. "This is a bombshell. If this all gets out, Kofi is destroyed. But Aisha, you're placing yourself in the crosshairs too. These people will not stop at anything to protect themselves." "I don't care," Aisha replied, her voice firm. "I won't let Naima's memory be stained by Kofi's ambition and greed. If they want war, they will get one." The tension mounted that night when Aisha's phone began to ring incessantly. When she picked up, a cold, calculated male voice spoke from the other end. "Aisha Sterling, we know what you possess. It would be prudent for you to forget about all this for the sake of your own safety and your family." Aisha felt a chill race down her spine, but she betrayed no fear. "Do not threaten me. I will not be silent." The call ended abruptly, but the message was clear. Aisha knew she was entering dangerous territory, but she would not retreat. The battle for the truth was only just starting, and she was willing to risk it all for justice to be served. The night felt heavier than usual. Aisha sat motionless in the dining room, going over the documents she found in Kofi's office time and again. Every word, every number, and every single name in those papers told a gruesome story that her daughter had been forced to endure in silence, Naima, her sweet Naima, had been caught in a network far darker than Aisha imagined. Naima's diary, now open right in front of her, seemed to hold not only words, but the very fragments of her daughter's soul. Every page was a desperate cry for help that nobody had heard in time. Aisha felt every word pierce her soul, but she knew she must continue. Dad insists that I have to help him. He says if I refuse, Mom will be in danger. He told me I have to take all the packages without asking any questions. I don't want to, but I'm terrified. He made himself very clear. If I talk, Mom will pay the price for my disobedience. The text, written in a cramped, nervous hand, confirmed what Aisha had begun to suspect. Kofi had manipulated Naima into his illegal affairs. The very deliveries Naima mentioned in her personal diary were unquestionably illicit substances. The puzzle pieces clicked into place. The erratic moods, the unexplained absences, and the vacant look in her daughter's eyes. Over the past few months, Naima had been enduring a secret torment caught between her terror of her father and the need to shield her mother. Amani showed up not long after entering the house with a worried expression that had been etched on her face. Since the service, spotting the documents and the journal on the table, she took a seat opposite Aisha, remaining completely silent. The tension between the two sisters was palpable. He made her do something awful, Amani, Aisha finally whispered, her voice cracking with grief. Kofi exploited her. He didn't just rob her of her childhood, he took her very soul. Amani reached for the diary and began to read. Her face went ashen as the words sank in. Contraband. Are you telling me Kofi made her deal this stuff? His very own daughter, Aisha, just nodded her eyes, staring into nothingness. He made threats against her. He said if she refused to cooperate, that I would be the one to pay the price. Naima was petrified. All that time I believed she was just pushing me away. This whole time I assumed she was just another rebellious teen. In reality, she was shielding me. Amani gripped Aisha's hands firmly. This isn't on you. You couldn't have known. This is all on that beast, not you. Aisha just shook her head in denial. But how could I have missed it? She was my little girl. I should have seen something. Amani started to speak, but the noise of the front door opening cut through the heavy silence. Both women stood up on edge. Aisha moved toward the door with caution. As she opened it, a shaking young man stood on her doorstep. It was Kesh Miller, Naima's closest friend. His face was ashen and his eyes were welling up with tears. Mrs. Aisha, I have to speak with you, he stammered, his voice breaking. Alarmed by his condition, Aisha led him inside. Kesh sank onto the sofa, twisting his hands together, as he struggled to find the words to begin. I was aware of what was going on with Naima. He confessed, his gaze on the floor. She told me it all. She explained her father made her transport packages, that he had eyes on her constantly. She confessed she couldn't get out of it because he would harm you if she ever defied him. Aisha felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Why didn't you say anything, Kesh? We might have been able to do something. We could have saved her. The boy lifted his head, tears now freely flowing down his face. She pleaded with me not to. She said it was too great a risk, that if you learned the truth, her father would make her pay. She was absolutely terrified, Mrs. Aisha, but I was lost too. I figured if I just stood by her, perhaps we could figure a way out of this together. Aisha knelt before him, taking both his hands. I am so very sorry, Kesh. I understand Naima confided in you, and I know you were in pain too, seeing her endure all of this. But right now, we require your assistance. We have to bring to light everything Kofi has done so he faces justice. Kesh nodded slowly. He took out his mobile and began searching through his messages. There's something else. Naima sent me this text the day before, the day it happened. He showed her the message, to Aisha, whose heart sank as she read the words. Kesh, I don't think I can take this much longer. Dad is more unhinged than ever. He's making me do a major delivery this week, but I have a bad feeling it's not what he claims. I'm so afraid. If anything should happen to me, please promise you'll watch over my mom. The text was just more proof of the nightmare Naima was enduring. Aisha felt a wave of pain and rage that shot her to her feet. This ends now. Kofi is going to pay for all that he has did to Naima. It wasn't just about forcing her into awful situations. He drove her to the edge. This was no accident, Kesh. My daughter was trying to get away, and he's the reason she fell. Imani drew near, placing a hand on her sister's shoulder. Then we'll ensure he pays. Let's bring this before the authorities. With the diary, the documents, and Kesh's statement, we have a strong case. Kesh glanced at them, his nod resolute. I will do anything necessary for Naima to receive justice. That very night, Aisha, Imani, and Kesh consulted a lawyer who detailed the necessary steps. While the case was complex, the evidence appeared substantial enough to connect Kofi to the crimes. The EK lawyer cautioned them it would be perilous, but Aisha refused to back down. As they exited the office, a black SUV pulled up right in front of them. Two men exited hastily, advancing with menacing looks. Aisha felt her heart stop cold. But before the men could speak a word, one of them answered a call. After listening for a few moments, they withdrew and got back into the vehicle. The encounter left them all on edge, but it also confirmed that Kofi would not remain idle. Aisha understood the battle had just begun, and she was prepared to confront it all, including the threats to honor her daughter's memory. Once home, Aisha took Naima's diary in her hands one final time. She clutched it to her chest as if she could feel her daughter in those pages. Don't you worry, my sweet girl. All that he did to you, all that you endured, is going to come to light. I promise you, she vowed as tears streamed down her face. Darkness fell, but Aisha felt no fear. She felt a mother's strength, resolved to defend what was left of her family, even if it meant facing down the most profound darkness. The night was a restless one for Aisha. In spite of her resolve, the memory of that black SUV and the men who approached haunted her, keeping her on edge. Fear was her constant foe, but she refused to let it paralyze her. Kofi had taken too much from her. The time had come to face him, even if that meant defying a network that appeared to stretch far beyond anything she had conceived. That morning, Kesh came to the house with a grave expression. He had some information he had to share, though he knew it would be difficult to accept. Aisha welcomed him inside, pouring him a cup of coffee as they both sat at the dining table. I discovered something. Kesh started, his voice taut with stress. I received a text from an unknown number. It said that I knew too much and needed to stay silent, but that wasn't even the worst of it. Aisha looked at him concerned. What else is there, Kesh? Tell me. The message contained a picture of Naima, not just any picture. It was from a night she mentioned months ago when her father made her attend a party with older men she did not know. No. An icy chill ran down Aisha's spine. She asked to see the image. Kesh pulled out his phone and displayed the photograph for her. Naima stood in a room crowded with people much older than she was. Her expression was visibly strained, with a tight smile that revealed she didn't want to be there. Why was she there? Aisha questioned, her voice just a whisper. Her father took her, Kesh answered. She told me she refused to go, but he still made her go. He used her to finalize his business deals like she was an object. It was his method for proving his control over. Naima told me she heard things at that party she was not meant to hear. After that night, the threats began to escalate. Frequent. Aisha's fists tightened, a desperate attempt to contain her fury. Naima had been exploited in ways beyond anything she could have fathomed. This injustice ends now. We will use this photograph as our proof, Aisha declared resolutely. That man will be held accountable for all his actions. Later, Aisha and Imani sat down with their attorney, presenting him with the incriminating photograph and Kesh's statement. The lawyer, though struck by the situation's severity, cautioned them about the path ahead, stating that Kofi was still an exceptionally dangerous individual. If you move forward, you must brace for any outcome. Kofi possesses powerful allies in influential positions. This will be difficult. Aisha's resolve was immediate. I know it won't be easy, but I am not stopping. Her lawyer nodded, his expression filled with concern. He outlined that their immediate next step was to officially file a formal complaint submitting every piece of evidence they had gathered. He also cautioned them about potential retribution, but Aisha was prepared to face whatever consequences came her way. Later that evening, while Aisha reviewed the paperwork a final time, a sharp sound of shattering glass startled her. Rushing into the living room, she discovered a brick with a piece of paper fastened to it. Imani, who had been in the kitchen, sprinted in at the sound of the crash. "What on earth was that?" she asked, panicked. Aisha carefully untied the paper, with shaking hands reading the message scrawled in bold, hostile letters, "Stop, or you are next." Imani then took the note, her eyes scanning it with a mix of shock and terror. "This has gone too far, Aisha. It's not safe here anymore. We must get to a secure location." Aisha adamantly shook her head. "If I run now, I am letting them win. I cannot do that, Imani. Naima never gave up, and I won't either." Imani pleaded with her, but Aisha's mind was made up. She did not sleep at all that night, guarding the house as her mind raced, plotting her next move. The following day, Aisha got an unforeseen phone call. The caller was Willow, Kofi's mistress. Her voice trembled thick with apprehension. "Aisha, we have to talk. There are some things that you absolutely need to know." Aisha was surprised by the call, but consented to a meeting. She picked a bustling downtown coffee shop, a public venue where she hoped to feel more secure. When Willow finally arrived, she was visibly anxious, her eyes darting around, as if she was afraid someone had followed her. "Why did you want to see me?" Aisha asked, making no effort to mask her suspicion. "Because I can't live like this any longer," Willow answered. "Kofi is a monster, and I have been complicit in his schemes. Initially, I convinced myself I loved him, but then I saw he was only using me the same way he used Naima." Aisha experienced a complex mixture of feelings as she heard those words. She wanted to despise Willow, but saw that she was simply another pawn caught within Kofi's intricate web of deceit. "What information do you have?" Aisha asked, struggling to maintain her composure. "I know Kofi isn't acting alone. He's backed by powerful men, politicians, entrepreneurs, people who will resort to anything and everything to protect their own interests. But I also know that Kofi grew careless. He documented everything, believing he could use it as leverage. As an insurance policy, I've seen those files." Aisha leaned forward, captivated. "Where are they?" For a moment, Willow faltered. "In a storage unit where he keeps his personal belongings. It's located outside the city in an old industrial park out in the county, but the place isn't secure. It is always being watched." Aisha jotted down the address. She realized it was a major risk, but also that this new information might be the very key to dismantling Kofi's entire operation. That night, Aisha and Kesh, they journeyed to the storage unit. Imani had protested, but Aisha persuaded her this was a necessary mission. The location was desolate, bathed in the sparse glow of street lamps. Getting closer, they saw a security guard posted at the side gate. Kesh proposed they wait for a distraction, so they ducked behind dumpsters. When the guard eventually strolled off for a cigarette, they took their chance. They slipped inside the unit with a key that Willow had supplied. Within, shelves overflowed with boxes and files. Aisha searched with desperation, aware their time was running out. At last, she located a container marked with Kofi's name. Upon opening it, she found the contents were precisely what she's had anticipated: contracts, financial transfers, and photos. Yet what seized her attention was a video stored on a flash drive. Kesh plugged it into his laptop, and they both watched the footage, horrified. It was a recording from one of the gatherings Naima was forced to attend. It depicted Kofi laughing, celebrating with men clearly part of his illicit enterprise. In the background, Naima stood in a corner looking deeply uneasy. Aisha felt hot tears roll down her cheeks seeing her daughter like that. Yet she knew this video was the crucial evidence they required to bring Kofi down. All at once, approaching footsteps echoed. Aisha and Kesh concealed themselves behind boxes, barely breathing. The guard was back, and with another man. The two of them spoke amongst themselves for several minutes, before departing once more. The close call made Aisha and Kesh realize they had to exit immediately. With the box of evidence in hand, they exited the unit and got back to the car. Aisha was certain they now possessed all they needed to ruin Kofi. However, she also knew his retaliation would be swift. "This is for you, Naima," she whispered while gazing at the night sky. She recognized the peril of her chosen path, but she also understood she could not turn back. Kofi and all who enabled him would answer for their actions, even if it meant she had to risk it all. The sun had scarcely begun to rise when Aisha examined for the 10th time the box of files and the flash drive she had retrieved from Kofi's storage space. The proof was so damning it would surely be his undoing. As she organized the papers, Kesh and Imani observed her from the living room, whispering quietly. A tangible tension was hanging heavy in the air, an anxiety that none of them could conceal. "So what is our next move?" Imani asked, nearing the dining room where Aisha was at work. Aisha glanced up, her gaze filled with resolve. "We're going to the authorities. We cannot delay this. Every passing minute gives them more time to cover their tracks." Kesh came closer, resting a hand on the table. "What if he has insiders with the police?" Kofi always bragged about his far-reaching connections. "Then we'll go to the press," Aisha answered, not missing a beat. "This entire story will be made public. They won't be able to suppress it with the whole world watching." Imani traded an anxious glance with Kesh, but they both knew Aisha was right. The sole method for facing a man like Kofi was a public exposé. Hours afterward, Aisha and Imani found themselves at a police station, their lawyer beside them. They had selected a precinct in a faraway district where they believed Kofi's influence would be diminished. The officer on duty examined the documents, his expression tightening as his face changed. He grasped the sheer scale of what he was witnessing. "This is far more significant than it appears," the officer stated, placing the papers on the desk. "If this checks out, we're looking beyond mere corruption and drug running. This involves money laundering, bribery, and potentially human trafficking." Aisha's hands tightened into fists at his words. She always knew Kofi was a ruthless man, but facing the true extent of his depravity was a much heavier blow than she ever imagined. "So what's the plan?" Imani asked anxiously. The officer sighed heavily. "We're going to launch a formal investigation, but it's a slow process. Kofi's allies are influential, so we must be cautious." Aisha leaned in, her intense gaze compelling the officer to sit straighter in his chair. "We are completely out of time. If you don't move now, he will vanish, and once he's gone, he'll be untouchable." The officer appeared to weigh her words, but before he could reply, another officer burst into the room. "Sir, we've just received a report that people are searching for this woman," he stated, gesturing to Aisha. "A pair of men were asking for her at the main entrance." The lead officer turned to Aisha. "Seriously, ma'am, I strongly suggest that you remain here while we handle this. It is too dangerous for you to leave now." Aisha shook her head. "I can't stay. I have more work to do, more people to reach out to. I refuse to hide." Imani pleaded with her, but Aisha was resolute. As they departed, the officer vowed to assign them protection, although his promise offered very little comfort. Meanwhile, Kofi had gotten word that Aisha was moving fast. He was inside his estate, flanked by his legal team and his most trusted associates. Things were spiraling out of control faster than he'd expected, and for the first time in ages, Kofi felt his grip on control loosening. "How did she locate that storage unit?" he demanded, his voice thick with fury. One of his confidants answered carefully, "Sir, we suspect Willow might have provided her with the details. Her behavior has been odd recently." Kofi slammed his fist on the table. Willow is a snake. If she's helping Aisha, I will personally see that she pays. But just before he could continue, a different man in the room interjected. Sir, there's more. Someone who was at the party has talked to the cops. They are beginning to piece it all together. If we don't act immediately, this will end poorly. Kofi knew they were right. Had to move swiftly. He eyed his men with a chill that made them recoil. Then we will shut this all down before it gets any bigger. Aisha Sterling made a grave error crossing me, and she is going to regret it. Aisha and Amani went back home with Kesh alongside them. They agreed the most secure plan was to stay together as they plotted their next step. In the meantime, Aisha reached out to a famous journalist lauded for his bravery in uncovering corruption. She forwarded him a copy of the files and the video detailing all she had discovered. The journalist, amazed by the scale of the story, pledged his support. They arranged to meet the following day to film an interview that would be aired live. Aisha sensed they were nearing justice, yet she was certain Kofi would not remain idle. Later that night, as they were sleeping, a sudden blast startled them awake. A car parked out front had been set ablaze. The inferno lit up the street, drawing alarmed neighbors from their homes. From the window, Aisha watched the blaze, her face a stark mask of fear and resolve. She recognized it as a warning, but she refused to be intimidated. This alters nothing, she vowed aloud, speaking more to herself than anyone else. I will not stop. The following day, Aisha met with the Shia journalist at a secret location. They filmed the interview where Aisha revealed everything: how Kofi had exploited Naima, the threats she endured, and the web of corruption she had uncovered. The moment was charged with emotion, and the reporter promised her the story would go public that very evening. Meanwhile, from his hideout, Kofi received word that his entire empire was on the verge of collapsing. He was consumed by rage and fear, yet knew he had allies still at large. He commanded one of his contacts to take drastic action to silence Aisha. When the interview was broadcast, the public reaction was instantaneous. Social media erupted with messages backing Aisha, while Kofi's name became a symbol of scandal. The authorities, compelled by the public outcry, fast-tracked their investigations. But on that very night, while Aisha was inside with Amani and Kesh, a team of men forced their way into the home. They were armed and, obviously, intent on silencing her for good. Aisha and the others scrambled to hide in a bedroom as the men ransacked the house, hunting for the documents. The tension in the air was suffocating. They could hear the intruders' footsteps drawing nearer and nearer. Aisha clutched Amani tightly while Kesh held his phone ready to call for help the moment he could. When the men at last found the documents, they abandoned the house, leaving a trail of destruction behind them. Aisha knew they had lost a vital piece, but she also knew the truth was now public knowledge. They couldn't retract what had been revealed. The story had crossed the point of no return. The interview had ignited a fire that Kofi and his associates could not put out. Aisha, though wounded and drained, understood they were nearer to justice than ever before. But she also knew the final showdown would be the most perilous of all. The city awoke to the shocking news of Aisha's interview. Her story had rocked the city, exposing a vast network of corruption and trafficking that implicated untouchable figures. Meanwhile, from the shadows, Kofi was hiding like a cornered animal, knowing his entire empire was collapsing. Yet he was not alone. Some of his allies were still active, prepared to take desperate measures to save themselves. That morning, Aisha stood in the ruined house, picking up the fragments of what had once been her home. Imani and Kesh helped her, silently aware that words were not enough to ease the burden she carried. Abruptly, Aisha's phone rang. It was her lawyer. Aisha, we must speak. The police have apprehended one of Kofi's closest men, and he is being interrogated. This could yield crucial information. Aisha felt her stomach clench. While the thought of more truths being exposed terrified her, she also knew that every detail could be the key to closing the case. She agreed to meet the lawyer at the police precinct. In a dim, confined room, a man was chained to a chair undergoing interrogation. His face was a mask of fear and desperation. It was Raoul, one of Kofi's most senior allies, a man involved in his operations from the very start. The police, with cold, hard stares, presented him with a deal, a reduced sentence in exchange for his full cooperation, confessing all he knew. Raoul, realizing his allegiance to Kofi was now worthless, began to confess, his voice quivering as he revealed the grim details. No one could have been prepared for what they heard. Naima was more than a mere pawn. Kofi had delivered her, selling her to the syndicate leaders. He brought her to those gatherings as a bargaining chip. That poor girl endured unimaginable horrors repeatedly. A deathly silence then filled the room. The police officers traded looks, unable to conceal their revulsion. Aisha, who was listening in from an adjacent room beside the attorney, felt her entire world shatter. Her breathing grew shallow and erratic as tears streamed down her face. Imani embraced her, trying to console her, but nothing could possibly ease that agony. "No, not my Naima, Aisha," whispered her voice, utterly broken. Raoul continued to speak, confessing even more details of Kofi's illicit transactions and his dealings with the crime syndicate. Finally, he revealed a detail that would change the course of everything. Kofi is hiding out at a compound on the outskirts of town near the state line. It's protected, but not as securely as it once was. His resources are dwindling. One of the policemen nodded quickly, writing down the crucial information. They knew this was their one real opportunity to capture him. As the police prepared to mobilize, Aisha sat in a corner of the station, completely and utterly devastated. The vision of her daughter suffering such brutality was a burden that felt impossible for her to bear. Imani remained by her side, clutching her hand firmly. "You must be strong, Aisha, for Naima's sake, for her memory." Aisha looked up, her eyes brimming with tears, but also a fiery resolve. "I'm going to make sure he pays for every single thing he did. He will not get away with this." The lawyer approached her with caution. "Aisha, I know this is a lot to process, but we must have your continued cooperation. The information we now have will lead us straight to Kofi. This is our moment." Aisha nodded, wiping away her tears. She knew that stopping now was simply not an option. Every single step she took brought her closer to justice for Naima. That very night, a convoy of police vehicles and special forces descended on the property where Raoul had stated Kofi was hiding. Aisha could not just stand idly by, so against the strong recommendations of the lawyer and police, she insisted on being present. Imani and Kesh accompanied her, unwilling to leave her by herself at such a critical juncture. Upon reaching the location, they saw the property was enclosed by high walls and being patrolled by armed men. The lights from the police cruisers illuminated the grounds as officers prepared to make their entry. The tension in the air was palpable. Aisha watched from a nearby vehicle, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Every second seemed to stretch into an eternity as the officers advanced. "But what if they don't find him?" Imani asked, her voice wavering. "They'll find him," Aisha replied with a firmness she could barely muster. Inside the property, the officers were met with immediate resistance. Gunfire erupted, screams followed, and chaos consumed the place. After several long minutes that felt like an eternity, an officer's voice crackled over the radio. "Property is secure. Kofi Bedell is in custody." Aisha felt a powerful surge of relief mixed with pure rage flood through her. They had the man who had destroyed her life and her daughter's, but there was still a long road ahead. In the days that followed, Kofi was brought to trial. The evidence presented against him was staggering. The documents, the witness statements, the video, and the confessions of his accomplices painted a damning and undeniable picture of his crimes. Aisha attended every single hearing, enduring the agony of listening to the darkest, the chilling details of Naima's fate. During a pivotal moment in the trial, Raoul took the stand, recounting how Kofi had bartered with cartel leaders using Naima as a bargaining chip. Overcome, Aisha shot up from her seat, unable to restrain. Her fury. "You're a monster. How could you sacrifice your own daughter?" She shrieked, tears flooding down her cheeks. Kofi merely glanced at her, his face a mask of indifference. His chill was suffocating, and Aisha knew then she would never receive an apology or any explanation. As the trial finally concluded, the judge prepared to deliver the verdict, a life sentence for Kofi in a federal prison with no chance of parole. Gasps and whispers filled the courtroom as Aisha shut her eyes, allowing the weight of the words to sink in. This was not comfort, but it was justice. Following the trial, Aisha visited Naima's gravesite. In her hand, she clutched a single white lily just as she had on the day of the funeral. She sank to her knees before the headstone, giving in to her grief. "I did it, my Naima. I uncovered the truth. And now the world knows of your bravery, of everything you suffered for me. Forgive me for not realizing it sooner. I promise that your memory will shine as a beacon for so many others." Imani and Sesh were with her, keeping a respectful distance, knowing Aisha needed this moment for her final farewell, one made from a place of peace. The story of Naima and Aisha echoed across the nation. A mother's courage in facing a web of corruption emboldened so many others to finally speak out. Though shattered by her grief, Aisha resolved to dedicate her life to advocating for victims of violence and abuse, making sure that no other mother would ever endure what she had. The evil that Kofi had planted could not be undone, yet Aisha discovered a way to transform her immense pain into power. Naima's memory was alive in her every action, and her legacy became a powerful symbol of resilience and hope. Did you enjoy this story? What city are you watching from? I'd love to see you in the comments. And if you enjoyed the story, please consider supporting me with a super thanks, which helps me create more stories just like this one. Thank you so much for your incredible support. I can't wait to read your thoughts on the story. You'll now see 2 new stories on your screen that I think you'll love. There's plenty more on my channel, so please remember to subscribe.